Clara's fingers found the hidden leather case before her mind registered what she was touching. The false bottom of the carpetbag gave way with a soft tear. 20 miles into Kansas territory, the wagon wheels grinding through another rut that sent her sliding across the bench. "Steady there," Benjamin Garrison said, not looking back from the reins. She pushed the case deeper, but felt the cold metal through worn leather, surgical steel. The scalpel she'd used 3 weeks ago, still crusted with dried blood she hadn't had time to clean before fleeing St. Louis. The prairie stretched endless under morning sun. No witnesses except wheat stalks bending in wind that carried the smell of distant rain and her own fear sweat. Benjamin's broad back blocked her from view as she carefully felt the case's contents through fabric. Everything still there, the probes, the sutures, the bone saw that had saved 12 women during the cholera outbreak of '78. "Not much further," Benjamin said. "Ranch is just past that rise." Clara's throat tightened. She'd answered his newspaper advertisement for household help, stood on that platform in Kansas City while men bid on her labor, stood silent while the auctioneer described her small hands. Good for fine work. Strong back despite her size. No family to come looking. That last part was true enough. The wagon crested the hill. Below sprawled the Garrison Ranch, main house, barn, smaller cabins for workers. Smoke rose from the kitchen chimney. A woman emerged onto the porch, shading her eyes. Benjamin's sister, Margaret, who'd need help with washing and cooking and all the things Clara had never done until poverty taught her. "That's home," Benjamin said. "Home." Clara almost laughed. Home was a medical degree hidden in bag lining. Home was knowledge that could save lives but had destroyed hers. Home was anywhere the U.E. Marshals weren't looking for the woman who'd defied Senator Morrison's direct order. The wagon hit another rut. The carpetbag shifted. The false bottom, already torn, split wider. Papers spilled across the wagon bed. Not just any papers. Her medical diploma unfurled in the wind. Dr. Clara Mitchell in elaborate script. The gold seal of Women's Medical College catching sunlight like an accusation. Benjamin turned at the sound of paper rustling. His eyes found the diploma first, then the surgical instruments gleaming through the torn leather, then Clara's face, drained of color. The wagon stopped. "Before we continue, please leave a like and subscribe. Let me know which city you're watching from." Now, let's get back to the story. Clara's knuckles ached from cranking the butter churn handle. 2 weeks at the Garrison Ranch, and her soft doctor's hands had started sprouting blisters. The cream sloshed inside the wooden barrel, thick and stubborn. "Thomas!" Margaret's voice cut through the afternoon heat. Clara looked up. The boy stumbled through the kitchen door. His left knee split open in a 4-inch gash. Blood soaked through his cotton trousers, dripping onto the pine floor. "Fell off the fence," Thomas said. His bottom lip trembled. "Caught it on the nail." Margaret grabbed a dish towel. "Oh, Lord, that's deep." Clara's hands moved before her mind could stop them. She pressed 2 fingers against Thomas's wrist pulse, rapid but strong. Her eyes tracked the wound edges, measuring depth, checking for debris. The nail had torn through skin and fat layer but missed the joint capsule. "Sit," Clara heard herself say. She guided Thomas to the kitchen chair. Margaret handed her the towel. Clara didn't take it. She was already at the water basin, scrubbing her hands with lye soap. 20 seconds. The ritual embedded in her bones from medical school. "Need clean cloth," Clara said. "And that brown bottle from the storage shed." "The carbolic?" Margaret asked. Clara caught herself. A ranch woman wouldn't know carbolic from kerosene. The one that smells sharp." She knelt beside Thomas. Her fingers probed the wound perimeter, feeling for bone fragments. The boy flinched. No crepitus, no joint involvement. The bleeding had slowed no arterial damage. Clara poured water over the wound, watching dirt and wood splinters flush out. Then the carbolic, diluted 3-to-1 like she'd learned in surgical rotation. Thomas hissed through his teeth. The bandaging took 8 seconds. Clara's hands wrapped the cotton strips in perfect figure-8 pattern. Tension distributed evenly. Edges overlapped precisely 1/2 inch. The kind of dressing that wouldn't slip or bunch. She tied off the final strip and forced her fingers to fumble with the knot, made it loose, retied it crooked. "There," Clara said, sitting back on her heels. Margaret stared at the bandage, then at Clara's hands steady, unmarked by the tremor that plagued most people after seeing blood. "Where did you learn?" Margaret began. The front door slammed. Benjamin's boots on the threshold. Clara stood quickly, wiping her hands on her apron, but Margaret's eyes stayed fixed on her, calculating, knowing. The general store air hung thick with tobacco smoke and pickle brine. Clara followed Margaret through the narrow aisles, her basket already heavy with salt pork and flour. 3 women clustered near the fabric bolts, voices low. "The Hendricks family," one said. "All 5 of them down with it." Clara's fingers tightened on the basket handle. She moved closer to the canned goods, pretending to examine the peach labels. "Just summer complaint," the second woman said. "Dr. Holcomb told my Henry so yesterday." A cough exploded from the back corner. Wet. Rattling. Clara's head snapped toward the sound. A young mother bounced a baby on her hip. Her free hand pressed to her mouth as another cough shook her chest. The baby's cheeks blazed red, not the healthy flush of a warm day, but the hectic color Clara recognized from her pediatric ward rotations. The mother wiped her mouth with her sleeve. A strand of saliva hung from her lip, tinged pink. Clara stepped forward. The words formed in her throat. "Step outside. That cough, the blood you need, isolation. Laudanum for the cough, willow bark for the fever, and your baby needs." She bit down on her tongue, hard. Copper flooded her mouth. Mrs. Garrison, the shopkeeper, Mr. Paulson, nodded at Margaret. "Got that thread you ordered from Kansas City?" Margaret moved to the counter. Clara stayed frozen between the pickle barrel and the door, watching the sick mother lean against the flour sacks. 2 children played at the woman's feet, sharing a peppermint stick, passing it between their mouths. The bell above the door jangled. Dr. Holcomb entered, his medical bag sagging in his arthritic grip. The mothers surrounded him immediately. "Doctor, my youngest has the fever. My husband can't keep food down. The baby won't stop crying." Dr. Holcomb raised a trembling hand. "Ladies, please, one at a time." His words slurred slightly. Clara smelled the whiskey from 10 feet away, self-medication for his joint pain, or perhaps something else. "It's just the heat," he said. "Keep them cool. Plenty of water. Maybe a dose of calomel if the fever persists." Calomel. Mercury chloride. Clara's stomach clenched. For an intestinal infection. Mercury would destroy what remained of the gut lining. These people would shit blood until they died. The sick mother coughed again. This time, red droplets sprayed across the white flour sacks. "Excuse me," the mother mumbled. She dabbed at the blood with her handkerchief, the same handkerchief she then used to wipe her baby's nose. Clara's teeth ground together. The disease pathway blazed clear in her mind: respiratory transmission, probably bacterial, 2 to 4 day incubation. That mother had just contaminated half the store. Every person here would carry it home to their families. Clara. Margaret touched her elbow. "You're shaking." Clara looked down. Her knuckles had gone white around the basket handle. Blood from her bitten tongue coated her teeth. "Just warm," Clara managed. The door burst open. Jake, Benjamin's foreman, stumbled in. Sweat poured down his face despite the morning cool. His breathing came in short gasps, interrupted by a barking cough. "Mrs. Garrison," Jake wheezed. "Need to tell Benjamin the Henderson cattle got loose. They're in our east pasture." "The Hendricks family is ill," Margaret said. "All of them. You shouldn't—" "Just dust from riding," Jake said. He coughed into his palm. Clara saw the phlegm thick, yellow-green. "Been dry as bones out there." Mr. Paulson rang up their purchases. His daughter, maybe 7 years old, helped pack the goods. She'd been playing with the other children earlier. Now she stood behind the counter, cheeks flushed, eyes too bright. Clara wanted to scream, wanted to slam her fist on the counter and shout what she saw: the infection spreading person to person to person. The town's well water probably contaminated. The useless doctor prescribing poison. The narrow window to establish quarantine procedures before the church bell tolled. Not the regular hour chime. The death knell. 3 sets of 3 rings. The blacksmith's baby, Mrs. Paulson whispered. 6 months old. Died this morning. Clara counted the rings, counted the people in the store, calculated transmission rates, incubation periods, mortality projections. The numbers filled her head like a scream she couldn't voice. Margaret loaded the supplies into their wagon. Clara climbed up beside her, movements mechanical. As they pulled away from town, Clara turned back. The sick mother stood on the store's porch, still coughing. 3 more women had stopped to talk with her, their children playing together in the dirt. "Stop," Clara said. "What?" Margaret looked at her. "We need to—" Clara's throat closed. Need to what? Reveal herself. A woman who'd been sold at auction, claiming to be a doctor who would believe her. And if they did, if anyone discovered what she'd been, why she'd been driven from St. Louis. The wagon rolled on. Behind them, the town continued its daily routine, unaware that death had already walked through their stores, their homes, their water supply. That night, Clara waited until the house went silent. She pulled the loose floorboard in her cabin and retrieved the leather journal hidden beneath. By candlelight, she wrote day 1 of outbreak, respiratory and gastrointestinal presentation. Minimum 12 confirmed infected. Transmission rate approximately. Her pen stopped. Through the thin walls, she heard it. Jake coughing in the bunkhouse. The same wet rattle she'd heard in town. The infection had reached the ranch. The church pews stretched half empty. Clara counted the gaps, the Hendricks family's usual spot vacant. The Millers, the Olsons, 23 missing out of 60 regular congregants. She sat between Margaret and Benjamin, Thomas fidgeting on Benjamin's other side, his bandaged knee bouncing against the wooden pew. Reverend Porter climbed the pulpit steps. His hand gripped the rail, knuckles white. A sheen of sweat covered his upper lip despite the morning cool. "Let us pray for our afflicted neighbors," he said. His voice cracked. "The Lord tests us." A wet cough from the back row, then another from the left side. Clara's fingers dug into her hymnal. She recognized the sound: productive cough, lower respiratory involvement. The disease had moved beyond the initial cases. Mrs. Henderson sat 3 rows ahead, her shoulders shaking. Not from tears. Clara watched the woman's neck muscles strain with each suppressed cough, trying to stay quiet during service, spreading microscopic droplets with every breath. The communion plate passed hand to hand, single chalice for wine. Clara watched each mouth press against the silver rim, leaving saliva, blood from cracked lips, invisible chains of transmission. When the chalice reached her, she touched it to her closed lips and passed it on. Benjamin's hand brushed hers as he took the cup. His palm burned with fever. Clara's breath caught. She looked at his profile, the flush across his cheekbones she'd attributed to the close air, the dampness at his hairline. He'd been tired at breakfast. Quiet. She'd thought it was worry about the sick cattle. The service ended. People clustered in the churchyard, voices urgent. "Emergency council meeting," Mayor Daniels announced. "The Comstock House." "Now?" Clara followed Margaret toward their wagon. Benjamin walked ahead, his gait slightly unsteady. As he reached for the wagon seat, his hand missed. He caught himself against the wheel. "Ben." Margaret touched his arm. "Just tired." He hauled himself up. The effort left him gasping. Clara climbed into the back, positioning herself to watch him without seeming to. His breathing, 28 respirations per minute. Too fast for sitting still. The way he held his chest, protecting his ribs from deep inspiration, early pneumonic involvement. They stopped outside Comstock's. Benjamin stayed with the wagon while Margaret joined the crowd of women gathering near the millinery shop next door. Clara stood at the shop window, angled to see through Comstock's front window. Mayor Daniels paced. Dr. Holcomb slumped in a chair, his medical bag at his feet. Clara could see his hands trembling from across the street, delirium tremens from alcohol withdrawal, or the disease, or both. "Quarantine!" someone shouted inside. Clara couldn't see who. "Lock the sick houses. Post guards." "The harvest," another voice argued. "We quarantine now. We lose the wheat. We all starve come winter." Dr. Holcomb stood, swayed, grabbed the table. "Gentlemen, I need—" He dropped back into the chair. His head lolled forward, through the window. Clara watched the council argue while their doctor sat semi-conscious. The mayor's face had gone red anger or fever. Impossible to tell from here. The banker, Mr. Hoffman, covered his mouth with a handkerchief between words. 40%, Clara whispered. The women around her were discussing recipes for fever tea, none of them hearing her. 40% mortality without intervention. A crash from the street. Clara spun. Benjamin had fallen from the wagon seat. He lay in the dust, body rigid, spine arched backward, tonic seizure, high fever causing neural disruption. Margaret screamed. Clara ran, dropping to her knees beside Benjamin. His jaw had locked, teeth grinding. Foam tinged pink with blood gathered at his mouth corners. She rolled him to his side, protecting his airway. Her fingers found his pulse rapid, thready, 140 beats per minute. "Get back!" someone shouted. "He's got it." The crowd scattered. Only Margaret stayed, grabbing Benjamin's shoulders. "Don't," Clara said. She kept her voice level, clinical. He could bite through his tongue. The seizure lasted 40 more seconds. Clara counted each one. When Benjamin went limp, she checked his breathing, shallow but regular, his temperature without a thermometer. She could only estimate from touch. 103, maybe 4. Jake stumbled out of Comstock's, sent to help. He made it 3 steps before his knees buckled. He caught himself on a hitching post, coughing so hard blood vessels burst in his eyes. "Get him home," Clara said to Margaret. She meant Benjamin, but her eyes stayed on Jake. The foreman tried to walk. His legs tangled. He went down hard, face scraping dirt. 2 ranch hands lifted Benjamin into the wagon bed. Clara climbed up beside him, her hand monitoring his pulse. Margaret took the reins. As they pulled away, Clara looked back. Jake still lay in the street. No one approached him. The ride back stretched endless. Benjamin's breathing grew more labored. Clara loosened his collar, positioned his head to keep his airway clear. Everything else she needed antimicrobials that wouldn't exist for 50 years. IV fluids. Oxygen might as well have been on the moon. They reached the ranch. The hands carried Benjamin inside. Clara followed, watching them lay him on his bed. Margaret pulled off his boots. Thomas stood in the doorway, eyes wide. "Thomas, go to your room," Margaret said. "Is Pa going to die like Ma?" The question hung in the air. Margaret's hands stilled on Benjamin's bootlaces. "Go to your room," Clara said. Her voice came out harder than intended. Command voice from her hospital days. Thomas fled. Clara looked at Benjamin's face. The characteristic rash had started petechiae spreading across his chest where Margaret had opened his shirt. Subcutaneous hemorrhaging. The disease was moving faster than she'd calculated. "We need to separate the sick," Clara said. "Benjamin in here. Thomas and you in the main room. I'll take the barn." We're not leaving Ben alone. The disease spreads through air, through touch. Every minute you're here." "I don't care." Margaret's voice broke. "I won't leave him." Clara wanted to grab her, shake her, make her understand. Droplet nuclei, fomite transmission, R-naught values, all the words that would mean nothing to a ranch woman in 1880, Instead, she said, then we need rules. No one enters without washing hands. Boil all water. Burn any cloth that touches him. Margaret nodded, desperate for any action. Clara wrote a list, her hands steady despite the chaos in her mind. Isolation protocols disguised as folk wisdom. Carbolic acid renamed as cleaning solution. Barrier nursing presented as careful tending. That night, Clara sat in her cabin with her medical texts spread across the floor. The books from the previous tenant outdated, incomplete, but containing enough. She traced treatment protocols, drug dosages, surgical procedures for complications she prayed wouldn't come. Tears dripped onto the pages, not from sadness, from rage. Pure burning rage at her own helplessness. All her knowledge, her training, her years of study useless without the tools, without the authority, without the ability to act. Through the window, she saw lamplight in the main house, Margaret keeping vigil. In the bunkhouse, more coughs, the sound carried on the still air. How many infected now? How many hours before? A knock at her door. Clara shoved the books under her bed and opened it. Margaret stood there, Thomas limp in her arms. His small body burned against Clara's hand when she touched his forehead. He started shaking. Margaret whispered, like Ben. I didn't know where else. Clara took the boy from her. His weight felt like nothing, like holding fever itself. Please, Margaret said. The word came out broken. I know you're not what you say. I don't care. Please. Clara looked at Thomas's face. The rash had already started. Clara stood across from Dr. Holcomb's surgery, pretending to examine bolts of fabric through the dressmaker's window. The old doctor's shadow moved behind his curtains, lurching, stopping, lurching again. She'd been watching for 20 minutes. The shadow fell. The crash carried across the street, breaking glass. A thud that could only be a body hitting floorboards. Clara's feet moved before her brain engaged. She stopped herself at the surgery door, hand on the brass knob. She couldn't go in. Couldn't reveal what she knew, how she knew it. Mrs. Paulson rushed past her, pushed the door open. Dr. Holcomb! Her scream brought others running. Clara joined the crowd, let herself be carried inside by the press of bodies. The doctor lay behind his examination table, eyes rolled back, showing only whites. Seizure foam, pink-tinged, crusted his lips. His breath wheezed through fluid-filled lungs. The stink of urine where he'd lost bladder control. Get him up, Mayor Daniels ordered. No. Clara spoke without thinking. Moving him could. She bit her tongue. A ranch woman wouldn't know about aspirational pneumonia, but the men already had Holcomb under the arms, dragging him to the patient cot. His head lolled back, airway compromised. Clara watched his lips turn blue, cyanosis, oxygen deprivation. Every instinct screamed to intervene. Someone fetch his wife, the mayor said. She's sick too. Mrs. Paulson whispered, 3 days now. Clara backed toward the medicine cabinet. The glass doors hung open from Holcomb's fall. Bottles lay scattered, some shattered. She cataloged the inventory while the others fussed over the unconscious doctor. Laudanum nearly empty. Calomel enough to poison half the town. Quinine 2 bottles. Carbolic acid 1 small bottle. Morphine locked drawer, still intact. Useless. All of it useless the way Holcomb had been prescribing. Calomel for fever mercury poisoning on top of infection. Laudanum for cough suppressing the body's attempt to clear infected sputum. The morphine hoarded when it could ease the dying. What do we do? Someone asked. Mayor Daniels straightened. I'll telegraph for a doctor from Millvale. That's 3 days, Mrs. Paulson said. Then we do what we can. Clara memorized the medicine cabinet's location, the lock type on the morphine drawer, the position of the back door. Then she slipped out with the crowd. The sun had set by the time she returned to the ranch. Benjamin's fever had broken temporarily, she could tell from the sweat-soaked sheets Margaret hung on the line. The temporary reprieve before secondary complications. Clara had seen it dozens of times in St. Louis. She waited, counted the hours by the church bells. Midnight, 1, 2, at 2:30. She wrapped her medical instruments in cloth, tucked them inside her coat. The 3-mile walk to town took 40 minutes in darkness. Her boots crunched frost-brittle grass. No moon. Better for what she planned. The surgery's back door opened with pressure applied to the right spot, a trick learned from a janitor at Women's Medical College. Clara slipped inside. The stink hit her immediately. Holcomb had vomited on himself. No one had cleaned it. She checked his breathing first. Still alive. Barely. Pulse weak but regular. Nothing she could do for him here. The medicine cabinet lock took 30 seconds with her surgical probe. Clara filled her pockets systematically. Not enough missing to notice, but enough to matter. Half the quinine. A third of the carbolic. 6 vials of morphine for the dying. When the time came. The patient files lay scattered from Holcomb's fall. Clara lit a candle, shielding it with her body. She read fast, memorizing names, symptoms, Holcomb's useless treatments. The Hendricks family, all 5 infected, prescribed calomel. The Millers, 2 children dead already. 3 more sick. The Olsons' footsteps on the front porch. Clara blew out the candle, pressed herself against the wall. The front door creaked open. "Doctor?" A woman's voice, desperate. "Doctor, please, my baby." Clara recognized her from the general store, the mother with the bloody cough, now carrying an infant who wheezed with each breath. The baby's limbs hung limp, late stage. The woman stumbled to Holcomb's cot. "Doctor, wake up, please." She shook his shoulder. The doctor didn't respond. Clara could save that baby, maybe. With proper dosing, careful hydration, airways kept clear. Everything she couldn't do, couldn't risk. The woman sank to the floor, clutching her infant. The wheeze grew weaker. Clara bit through her lip to stay silent. Blood filled her mouth. She remained frozen against the wall until the woman finally left, still carrying her dying child. Clara wrote treatment protocols on a blank patient form. Unsigned, no handwriting that could be traced. Clear instructions for quinine dosing, carbolic acid dilution, symptomatic management. She placed it where someone would find it morning. Then she left the way she'd come. Dawn touched the horizon as she reached the ranch. Her boots had worn blisters that leaked clear fluid into her stockings. She stopped at her cabin to hide the medicines, then checked the main house. Margaret sat at the kitchen table, head in her hands. She looked up. Her eyes had sunk deep, surrounded by shadows. Ben's fever's back. Worse. Clara moved to the stove, started water boiling. Thomas. Fine. Still sleeping. They worked in silence, preparing broth. Benjamin wouldn't be able to swallow, folding cloths for compress he didn't need. Busy work, helpless work. A cry from Thomas's room. Margaret ran. Clara followed. They found Thomas on his bedroom floor, body rigid, back arched in the same tonic seizure that had taken Benjamin. His nightshirt had soaked through with sweat. The characteristic rash spread across his visible skin like spilled wine. "No." Margaret dropped beside him. "No, no, no." Clara knelt, turned Thomas on his side. Her fingers found his carotid pulse hummingbird fast. His temperature radiated through his nightshirt, 104 at least. Her hands moved without thought, checking lymph nodes swollen hard as rocks, palpating his abdomen rigid, distended, listening to his breathing fluid crackling in both lungs. "Get Benjamin," Margaret sobbed. "He'll ride for the doctor." "Benjamin can't ride." Clara kept her voice clinical, detached, the only way she could speak without screaming. "The doctor's dying. There's no one coming." The seizure ended. Thomas went limp, unconscious but breathing. Clara lifted him so light, bones like a bird's, She carried him to his bed while Margaret clutched at her sleeve. There has to be something. Someone. Clara laid Thomas down, positioned him to keep his airway clear. The rash had spread to his face now. Subcutaneous bleeding that would only get worse. She thought of the medicines hidden in her cabin, the knowledge locked in her head. The treatments she could give if she could only, something. Margaret grabbed Clara's wrist. Her fingers dug in hard. The way you bandaged his knee. How you knew about the seizure. Something. Clara pulled free. I need to get cool water. For the fever. She fled to the kitchen. Behind her, Margaret's sobs mixed with Thomas's labored breathing. Clara gripped the water pump handle until her palms split. 2 hours until the medicine she'd stolen would be missed. 6 hours before Thomas's fever either broke or pushed him past recovery. 12 hours before Benjamin's secondary pneumonia would demand intervention. And all Clara could do was watch. Watch and know and say nothing while a boy died in front of her. While the town died around her. While her silence killed as surely as any disease. She pumped water into the basin. Blood from her palms turned it pink. Through the window, she saw Jake stumble from the bunkhouse. He made it 3 steps before falling to his knees, coughing up what looked like pieces of lung tissue. 2 other ranch hands lay in the doorway behind him, dead or dying. Clara carried the water basin back to Thomas's room. Margaret had pulled the boy into her lap, rocking him. His breathing had changed irregular, gasping. Cheney-Stokes respiration. The brainstem failing. Please, Margaret whispered. Not to Clara. To God. To anyone. Not him too. Clara set down the basin. Water sloshed over the edge, mixing with the blood from her hands. She reached for a cloth, and her fingers brushed against something under Thomas's pillow. A book. One of her medical texts. The one she'd thought she'd hidden. Margaret's eyes met hers across Thomas's fevered body. I know what you are, Margaret said. The medical text lay between them like an accusation. Margaret's fingers stayed twisted in Thomas's nightshirt, knuckles white. The boy's breath rattled in his chest, wet. Irregular. The book was under your bed, Margaret said. I was looking for clean blankets. Clara's throat closed. The words she needed denials, explanations, lies wouldn't form. Thomas convulsed, a small tremor that ran through his fevered body. His lips had gone blue at the edges. You read it at night. Margaret's voice stayed flat. I've seen the candlelight through your window. Seen you writing. Thomas's breathing stopped. 1 second. 2. 3. Then a gasping inhale that sounded like drowning. He's dying, Margaret said. My boy is dying, and you're standing there with those clean hands and that knowledge, and you're letting him die. Clara's fingernails cut into her palms. I'm nobody. Just a woman who needed work. Stop. Margaret laid Thomas on his bed, stood. She crossed to Clara's carpet bag in 2 strides, dumped it onto the floor. Clothes spilled out. The false bottom stayed intact until Margaret's fingers found the hidden seam. She ripped it open. The leather case fell out first, then the rolled papers. Margaret grabbed them, unrolled them with shaking hands. Diploma of Medicine, she read. Women's Medical College of Chicago. Clara Mitchell, 1879. Her eyes moved to the other papers. Letters of commendation, surgical certification, top of your class. Clara watched Thomas's chest rise and fall. 17 breaths per minute. Too slow, his body giving up. You're a doctor, Margaret's voice cracked. A real doctor. And you've been playing servant while... She pressed her hand to her mouth. Mary, Ben's wife. She died of fever 2 years ago. Could you have saved her? I wasn't here. Could someone like you have saved her? Clara's silence answered. Margaret grabbed the leather case, shook it open. Surgical instruments scattered across the floor. Scalpels, probes, sutures. A bone saw that caught the morning light. Why? Margaret asked. Why hide this? Look at the dismissal letter. Margaret found it, folded small at the bottom of the case. Clara watched her read, watched her face change as she understood. You treated a senator's mistress against direct orders. She was hemorrhaging after a botched abortion. The senator wanted her to die. Cleaner that way. Clara's voice came out raw. I saved her anyway. The medical board revoked my license, blacklisted me at every hospital from Chicago to Boston. When my money ran out, when I couldn't even get work as a nurse. She gestured at nothing. The auction block in Kansas City, farm work or starve. Thomas made a sound like water being poured over hot stones. Pink foam bubbled at his lips. I don't care. Margaret dropped to her knees beside Clara's medical supplies. I don't care why you hid it. Save him. If anyone finds out, save him. Margaret's scream tore through the house. I'll say nothing. I'll swear on Mary's grave, on the Bible, on anything. Just save my boy. Clara knelt beside the scattered instruments. Her hands moved without conscious thought, selecting what she needed. The morphine from her midnight theft, the quinine, the carbolic. She grabbed a clean basin, mixed the solutions with the precision of muscle memory. Get fresh water boiling, clean cloths, all the ice from the ice house. Clara's voice shifted, became the one she'd used in hospital wards. Move. Margaret ran. Clara turned to Thomas, her hands already working. She pulled him upright, positioned him to drain the fluid from his lungs. The pink foam meant pulmonary edema, blood vessels leaking into the alveoli. Without modern diuretics, she could only Thomas vomited. Blood and mucus splashed across Clara's hands. She didn't flinch, turned him, kept his airway clear, watched the color of what came up. Dark blood old. Not fresh hemorrhage. She drew morphine into her syringe a quarter grain, enough to ease his breathing without suppressing it entirely. The needle found the vein on her first try. Skill her hands hadn't forgotten. Thomas's labored breathing eased slightly. Margaret returned with supplies. Clara packed ice around Thomas's neck, armpits, groin major vessels to cool his core temperature. She mixed quinine with honey and water, spooned it between his lips drop by drop. Most dribbled out. She kept going. Hold his head. Margaret cradled Thomas while Clara worked. She stripped his soaked nightshirt, sponged him with carbolic solution diluted to prevent skin damage. Found the swollen lymph nodes in his neck, under his arms. Not as hard as she'd feared. The infection hadn't gone fully septic. 4 hours. Clara lost herself in the work, became nothing but hands and knowledge in the fight against death. She monitored Thomas's pulse, breathing, temperature, adjusted the morphine dose when his breathing grew too shallow, forced more quinine between his lips when he could swallow. The sun reached noon position. Thomas's fever broke, not gradually, all at once, like a dam bursting. Sweat poured from his skin, soaking through fresh clothes as fast as Margaret could change them. His breathing deepened, steadied. The pink foam stopped bubbling at his lips. Is he... Margaret couldn't finish. Maybe. Clara checked his pulse. Still fast, but stronger. Regular. The next 6 hours will tell. Footsteps on the porch. Clara shoved the medical supplies under Thomas's bed just as Benjamin appeared in the doorway. He swayed, caught himself on the frame. His fever had broken too, but weakness kept him upright through will alone. Heard screaming, he said. Thomas took ill. Margaret's voice stayed steady. But he's better now. Clara knew what to do. Benjamin's eyes moved from his son to Clara. Saw her sleeves rolled up, blood under her fingernails, the competent way she held Thomas's wrist to check his pulse. My mother was a midwife, Clara lied. She taught me things. Benjamin nodded, too exhausted to question. He stumbled to Thomas's bedside, touched his son's face. He's cool. The fever broke. More footsteps. Jake and 2 ranch hands stood in the hallway, all 3 gray-faced and hollow-eyed but vertical. Mrs. Garrison, Jake's voice rasped from coughing. There's people coming, from town. Lots of them. Clara looked out the window. 3 wagons approached, loaded with people. She recognized Mrs. Henderson in the first wagon, holding a child who hung limp as cloth. "They heard Thomas got better," Jake said. "They want to know what you did." Margaret's eyes found Clara's. A question there. Clara shook her head. If word spread that someone here had medical knowledge, if anyone suspected, investigated, discovered who she really was. The wagons pulled into the yard. Mrs. Henderson climbed down, her dead child still in her arms. Behind her, others. Some carrying sick family members. Others clearly infected themselves, swaying on their feet. "Please," Mrs. Henderson called out. "Whatever you did for the boy, please." Margaret stood. "I'll tell them we prayed. That God—" "Mom," Thomas's voice, weak but clear. "Water." Clara handed Margaret the cup, watched her help Thomas drink. The boy's eyes had cleared. His breathing stayed steady. He would live. This one child, out of how many dying? The crowd outside grew larger. More wagons arriving. Someone started pounding on the door. "Mrs. Garrison, we know you helped him. Help us." Clara thought of the medicine hidden in her cabin. Enough for maybe a dozen people if she stretched it. 50 or more gathered in the yard and growing. She could reveal herself, save some of them, lose everything again, end up somewhere worse than an auction block. Or she could stay silent, let them die, keep her secret. "Clara," Benjamin had moved to the window. His voice carried an odd note. "That woman by the well. I think she's—" Clara looked. A young mother knelt in the dust, her infant blue and still. She pressed her mouth to the baby's, trying to breathe life back into it. Each breath she gave pushed pink foam from the infant's nose. The mother Clara had hidden from in Holcomb's surgery, the baby she could have saved, now past saving. "The child's gone," Benjamin said. The mother kept breathing into the corpse. The crowd parted around her, some from respect, others from fear of contagion. She didn't notice, just kept trying to resurrect what couldn't be resurrection. Margaret touched Clara's shoulder. "What do we do?" "Through the window." Clara saw more wagons coming. The entire town, it seemed. The sick and dying, all hoping the Garrison Ranch had some miracle, some answer. In her cabin sat enough medicine to save perhaps 1 in 5. In her hands lived the knowledge to save more, if she had supplies, if she had time, if she had the authority to act. "Clara," Margaret's grip tightened. "They're going to break down the door." The pounding intensified, voices pleading, demanding, threatening. Clara heard wood splinter. She looked at Thomas, alive because she'd acted. At the mother in the yard, her child dead because Clara hadn't. Her hand moved to the medical bag under the bed. Margaret saw the gesture. "If you do this, I know." The front door cracked. Voices spilled through. Clara pulled out her medical diploma, still crumpled from Margaret's hands. The seal of the Women's Medical College caught the light. Dr. Clara Mitchell. The woman she'd been. The woman she'd hidden. The door gave way. The crowd pushed through the broken door like water through a dam. Clara shoved the diploma back under Thomas's bed, stood between the mob and the boy. Her hands stayed at her sides, no defensive posture that might mark her as different. "Where is she?" Mrs. Henderson's voice, hoarse from crying. "The woman who saved the boy." Benjamin stepped forward, still unsteady. "My son recovered on his own." "God's will." "Liar." A man Clara didn't recognize pushed to the front. Jake heard her giving orders, saw her working. Margaret moved closer to Clara. "We prayed, that's all." The crowd pressed deeper into the room. The stench of sickness filled the air, unwashed bodies. Vomit. The sweet rot smell of fever. Thomas whimpered from his bed. "Get out." Benjamin's hand went to his hip where his gun would normally rest. Found nothing. "All of you, out. 8 dead since this morning." Mrs. Henderson still held her corpse child. 8. Dr. Holcomb's raving about demons. The mayor locked himself in his house, and your boy lives." She stepped toward Clara. The dead infant's head lolled back, revealing the dark pooling of blood beneath skin where gravity had pulled it. Livor mortis, dead at least 4 hours. "Please." Mrs. Henderson went to her knees, the corpse still clutched to her chest. "Whatever you did, my other children, we can't help you." Clara's voice came out steady, flat. "Take your dead and go." The woman's face crumpled, but she stood, backed away. The crowd followed, muttering, threats and prayers mixed together. The broken door hung crooked as they filed out. Clara waited until the last wagon rolled away. Then she ran to her cabin, grabbed the stolen medicines. Not enough. Never enough. But she couldn't watch anymore. Couldn't stand still while Clara, Benjamin stood in her doorway. His eyes took in the medical supplies spread on her bed, the surgical instruments, the diploma she'd grabbed without thinking. She froze. "My wife died of childbed fever." His words came slow, careful. 2 years back. The doctor said nothing could be done. He picked up a scalpel, turned it in the light. Could something have been done? Clara's throat burned. Yes. Benjamin set the scalpel down, walked out without another word. Night fell. Clara sat in her cabin, medical bag packed, waiting. For Benjamin to return with the sheriff, for the mob to come back, for something. Instead, a soft knock, a woman's voice. "Please, my baby." Clara opened the door. A young mother stood there, not Mrs. Henderson. Someone Clara didn't recognize. The woman held an infant maybe 9 months old. Wheezing. Burning with fever. But alive. "I heard." The woman stopped, started again. "They say someone here knows things. I won't tell. Just please." Clara should have shut the door. Instead, she stepped aside. The woman entered. Clara examined the child by lamplight. Congested lungs, but not yet hemorrhaging. Fever high, but not critical. Treatable. If she worked fast, she mixed the quinine solution. Showed the mother how to hold the baby's head. How to drip the medicine slowly so the child wouldn't choke. The morphine dose had to be exact. Too much would stop the breathing. Too little wouldn't ease the lung constriction. 1 drop every 30 seconds, Clara said. Count them out loud. The mother counted. 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi. Her voice shook on every number. Clara monitored the infant's breathing. Color improved from blue-gray to pink. The wheeze softened. After an hour, the baby's fever broke, not dramatically like Thomas's, but steadily declining. "She'll live," Clara said. The mother clutched her child, sobbing into the small body. Thank you. I won't tell anyone. I swear." But she did tell. Of course she did. Whispered to her sister, who told her husband, who told his brother. By midnight, they came again. Not a mob this time. Individuals, sneaking to Clara's cabin with sick children, dying parents, each swearing secrecy, each carrying away a saved life or a confirmed death. Clara worked in the dark. No lamps that might draw attention. She diagnosed by touch, feeling for swollen nodes, listening to breath sounds with her ear against their chests. The medicines ran low. She diluted them, stretched doses, prayed her calculations held. A 3-year-old girl with early-stage symptoms savable. A man too far gone. Lungs already hemorrhaging, she could only ease his passing. Twin boys, one responding to treatment, the other fading despite everything. Why him and not his brother? Their father asked, holding the dying twin. Clara had no answer. Never had an answer for that question. Benjamin appeared sometime after 2 in the morning. Not to stop her. He carried a woman, Mrs. Daniels, the mayor's wife, unconscious, barely breathing. Her husband locked her in a room, said quarantine. She was dying alone. Clara examined her. Advanced pneumonia, sepsis setting in, without antibiotics. Can you save her? I can try. She tried. Cut into the woman's throat with a scalpel to insert a breathing tube made from a hollow reed. Drained fluid from her lungs with a needle between the ribs. Pushed morphine to ease the respiratory distress. Quinine to fight the infection. Alcohol to clean the wounds. Benjamin held the lamp steady. Didn't flinch when blood sprayed across his shirt. Handed Clara instruments without being asked, learning their purposes through observation. Mrs. Daniels survived the night. Barely. Clara stayed beside her, monitoring each breath. The mayor's wife, if she lived, if she talked, everyone would know. The secret would be over. Dawn came gray through the window. Clara's hands trembled from exhaustion. Empty medicine bottles surrounded her. She'd used everything. Mrs. Daniels' eyes opened, focused on Clara, on the blood under Clara's fingernails, the surgical instruments, the diploma Benjamin had placed on the table sometime during the night. "You're a doctor," Mrs. Daniels whispered. Clara waited for the condemnation, the outrage. Instead, Mrs. Daniels gripped her hand. "My sister, her children, are they?" "I don't know. The Henderson family. 3 of 5 survived." Mrs. Daniels closed her eyes. 8 died yesterday. How many today? Without medicine, without proper treatment. Clara's voice cracked. Dozens. My husband won't listen. Too proud. Too scared. Mrs. Daniels struggled to sit up. But if I tell them, if they see what you did for me, they'll destroy me. You know what happens to women who... Not if I protect you. Mrs. Daniels' voice grew stronger. Not if the mayor's wife vouches for you. Footsteps outside. Multiple people. Clara looked through the window. A crowd had gathered in the yard again, but not angry this time. They stood in clusters, some holding sick family members. Waiting. Benjamin opened the door. They know? Everyone knows? Clara saw faces she recognized. The shopkeeper whose daughter she'd secretly treated. The ranch hand she'd saved 2 nights ago. The mother from the barn, her baby breathing normally in her arms. They're not here to hurt you, Benjamin said. They're here because word spread that someone in this cabin knows how to fight the sickness. Mayor Daniels pushed through the crowd. His face had gone purple with rage when he saw his wife propped up in Clara's bed, surgical incisions still fresh on her throat. What have you done to her? Mrs. Daniels grabbed his wrist. She saved me. While you left me to die, she saved me. The mayor looked from his wife to Clara, saw the medical instruments, the diploma. Understanding dawned on his face, followed by something else. Calculation. You're the one, the woman doctor they threw out of St. Louis. Clara's blood went cold. He knew, somehow, he knew exactly who she was. The mayor smiled, not a kind expression. Well then, seems we need to have a conversation about your future in this town. The mayor's fingers wrapped around Clara's wrist, not violent, possessive, like handling property he'd just purchased. You'll work for the town, Daniels said. Under supervision. No independent decisions. I'll telegraph St. Louis. Verify you're not wanted for saving a woman's life. Clara pulled her wrist free. Your wife is breathing because of what I did 4 hours ago. That incision in her throat. That's why she's alive. Mrs. Daniels tried to speak. Only a whisper emerged through her damaged throat. Listen. To her. Quiet. The mayor didn't look at his wife. You're delirious. Clara picked up her medical bag. The weight felt different now. Heavier with purpose rather than secrets. The schoolhouse well is contaminated. That's your infection source. You can't know that from way the infection pattern radiates from the school. Every first case either has children attending or lives on the route where children walk home. They drink from that well at recess. Clara moved past him toward the door. The Henderson family draws water there for their store. The Millers live next door. The Olson's daughter teaches there. Benjamin stepped aside to let her pass. The crowd in the yard parted as she walked through. Some faces showed fear. Others, desperate hope. She kept walking. "Stop!" The mayor followed. "You have no authority." "Then give it to me." Clara turned on the porch steps. "Or watch your town die. Dr. Holcomb is unconscious, probably dying. You have no medical personnel, no one else within 3 days' ride. You want to waste time debating my credentials while people die. Fine, but their deaths are on you." A woman pushed forward Mrs. Garrett, whose infant Clara had saved during the night. "She helped my baby. When everyone said she'd die, this woman saved her." "Mine too." Another voice. "My son was turning blue. She got him breathing." "My husband." A third woman. "She told me how to bring his fever down." The testimonies came faster. A dozen people Clara had treated in darkness, all stepping forward. The mayor's face went from purple to white. "You treated them without authority." "I treated them because they were dying." Clara walked down the steps, through the crowd, toward town. They followed, all of them. A procession of the sick and desperate. The main street stretched empty except for bodies. Clara counted 3 corpses laid on porches, awaiting burial. The church doors stood open. Someone had dragged pews outside to make room for makeshift sickbeds. 20 or more people lay on the floor inside. The smell hit her from 30 feet away, death and desperation. Clara entered. Her boots clicked on the wood floor. The conscious patients turned toward the sound. She recognized most faces. People who'd served her at shops, who'd watched her ride past with Benjamin, who'd seen her as nobody. Property. A woman bought at auction. Now they saw her hands competent on her medical bag, saw her eyes assess their symptoms with clinical precision, saw her move with the authority of someone who'd worked hospital wards. "You," she pointed at a man who could still stand. "Get every bucket you can find. Set up boiling stations outside. Rolling boil for 10 minutes minimum." She turned to 2 women. "Strip all bedding. Burn what's soiled beyond cleaning. Boil the rest." "Who are you two?" one woman started. "Someone who knows what cholera looks like when it hits water supplies." Clara knelt beside the nearest patient, a boy maybe 12. His eyes had sunk deep, skin tented when she pinched at severe dehydration. "This isn't just respiratory. It's waterborne too. The fever's just the secondary infection hitting weakened systems." She moved from patient to patient, triaging. Black marks on those beyond help 5. Red for critical but salvageable 8. Yellow for stable but needing care 9. The mayor had followed her in. "You can't just shut up or help." Clara didn't look at him. "Mrs. Garrett, I need every woman who can stand. We're setting up stations. Hydration here, fever management there, critical care by the altar." The women moved. No more hesitation. They'd seen their children saved or lost. They knew the difference between action and talk. "The well," Clara said to Benjamin. "Seal it. Now. Postguards. Anyone drinking from it gets worse." Benjamin left immediately. The mayor stood frozen in the church doorway. Clara opened her medical bag, pulled out her last vial of morphine. The boy she'd marked black, maybe 10 years old, was drowning in his own blood. She drew the full dose, enough to ease him into death without pain. "What are you doing?" The mayor grabbed her arm. "Mercy." Clara injected the morphine. The boy's tortured breathing eased. His mother, watching from nearby, pressed her hand to her mouth. "Thank you," the mother whispered. Clara moved to the next patient, then the next. Her supplies ran out in minutes. She switched to battlefield medicine positioning for drainage, percussion therapy to clear lungs, using whatever came to hand, a hollow reed for airways, alcohol from the saloon for sterilization, willow bark tea for fever. "I need supplies from Holcomb's surgery," Clara announced. "Locked," someone said. Clara looked at the speaker, Mr. Hoffman, the banker. "Then unlock it." On whose authority? Clara stood. Blood covered her arms to the elbows. 3 patients had died while they debated. 2 more would die within the hour without intervention. Mr. Hoffman, your daughter is in the yellow category. Stable now, but this infection moves fast. In 4 hours, she could be red. In 8, black. You want to debate authority while she slides toward death. Hoffman's face went gray. He pulled keys from his pocket. Take whatever you need. Clara sent runners for supplies. Had the women organize treatment lines, set up isolation protocols. The church transformed from chaos to order. Not perfect, not a modern hospital, but functional. 4 hours in, someone brought news. Dr. Holcomb died. Clara didn't pause in suturing a chest wound where broken ribs had punctured through skin. Burn his bedding. Scrub the surgery with carbolic. We'll use it as a treatment center. The mayor hadn't left. He watched her work, calculating something. You need legitimacy, he said finally. I can give it to you. Emergency appointment as town physician. In exchange for, you work for the town, not independent. Under contract, my terms. Clara tied off the suture. No. Then I'll telegraph St. Louis. Tell them where to find their runaway. Do it. Clara stood, faced him. Telegraph St. Louis. Ask about Dr. Clara Mitchell. Ask about the senator's mistress who lived because I defied orders. Ask the medical board why they revoked my license for saving a woman they wanted dead. She stepped closer. The mayor stepped back. But also ask the Women's Medical College about their top graduate. Ask the Chicago Hospital about their youngest chief surgical resident. Ask the families of the 100 women I saved during the typhoid outbreak of '78. Another step. The mayor's back hit the wall. I was thrown out for having ethics they didn't share. You want to use that against me, try. But these people, she gestured at the packed church, don't care about your politics. They care about living. Telegraph coming through. Everyone turned. A boy ran in with a yellow paper. The mayor snatched it. Read. His face changed. What? Clara asked. He handed her the telegram. From St. Louis. But not what she expected. Dr. Mitchell's credentials confirmed. 4 former colleagues vouch for competence. Medical board reviewing previous ruling. Signed, Dr. James Wright, Chief of Medicine, St. Louis General. Clara read it twice. James Wright, her mentor, who'd stayed silent during her trial, now speaking up when another one. A second telegram, this time from the Women's Medical College. Dr. Clara Mitchell remains our finest graduate. Full support for emergency appointment. Signed, Dean Mary Thompson. The mayor took both telegrams. Read them. Looked at Clara covered in blood, surrounded by patients she'd saved and would save. Fine, he said. Emergency appointment. But we do this properly. In front of witnesses. He climbed to the pulpit Clara had used for triage. By emergency authority as mayor, I appoint Dr. Clara Mitchell as acting physician for the duration of this crisis. Silence. Then, from the back, slow clapping, Mrs. Daniels, who shouldn't have been able to walk, stood in the doorway. The tracheotomy wound still raw on her throat. She clapped until others joined. Not celebration. Acknowledgement. Clara turned back to her patients. No time for whatever this moment meant. The boy on the table had stopped breathing. She grabbed her hollow reed, ready to cut another airway. When she heard it, hoofbeats, dozens of horses. She looked through the church window. Armed men rode into town, not military, not doctors. Their leader wore a badge, a U.S. Marshal's badge. He dismounted, walked toward the church, a paper in his hand. His eyes found Clara through the window. Dr. Clara Mitchell, he called out. I have a federal warrant for your arrest. The marshal's boot struck the church floor like hammer blows. Clara's hand stayed steady on her patient's throat, feeling for pulse. The boy had started breathing again, shallow but consistent. Step away from the patient. Doctor. The marshal's voice carried no threat, just tired authority. He'll die if I move. Clara pressed her fingers deeper, monitoring the weak heartbeat. 2 more minutes. The marshal stopped 3 feet away, close enough that Clara could smell the road dust and leather. Senator Morrison wants you brought back to St. Louis. For saving his mistress's life. For stealing medical supplies from St. Louis General during your departure. Clara's jaw tightened. She had taken supplies. Morphine, surgical instruments, everything she'd needed to survive. Everything she'd just used to save this town. Marshal. Mrs. Daniels stepped forward, the tracheotomy wound still raw on her throat. That woman saved 37 people in the last 18 hours. Ma'am, I have a warrant. I don't care if you have word from God himself. Benjamin moved between Clara and the marshal. Behind him, others, the mothers whose children lived, the husbands whose wives breathed. They formed a wall of bodies. The marshal's hand moved to his gun. Didn't draw it. Just rested there. You want to arrest me? Clara stood, blood still wet on her arms. Fine. But first, help me move these patients. That girl needs her dressing changed every 2 hours or gangrene sets in. The boy by the window requires percussion therapy on his lungs every 30 minutes. Mrs. Henderson's surviving children need. I'm not a doctor. Neither was I, according to the medical board. Clara pulled off her blood-soaked apron. But here we are. She walked toward him. The crowd parted, reluctant. The marshal's deputies shifted on their feet, hands near weapons but uncertain. They'd expected resistance. Not this. Clara held out her wrists. Arrest me. The marshal pulled out iron shackles. They clicked around her wrists with a sound like breaking bones. No. Thomas's voice. The boy stood in the church doorway, still pale from his illness but standing. You can't take her. Margaret caught him before he could run forward, but others moved. The banker, the shopkeeper, even the mayor stepped forward. Marshal, Mayor Daniels said, we're in the middle of an epidemic. Our doctor just died. This woman, regardless of her past, is the only medical knowledge we have. The law is killing us. The mayor pulled out a paper. I've already sent emergency appointment documentation to the territorial governor. Dr. Mitchell is officially our town physician. That doesn't override a federal warrant. Clara felt the iron cutting into her wrists, counted the patients she could see. 8 critical, 12 serious, 20 more who'd relapse without continued treatment. Marshal? A new voice, one of his deputies, younger, staring at the rows of sick. My sister lived in Millbrook during their cholera outbreak. Lost her husband and both boys. If this is the same thing. The marshal looked at his deputy, at the packed church, at Clara standing quiet in shackles while behind her a child started convulsing. That girl, Clara said without turning. She needs Margaret knows. Show them. Margaret. The way I showed you with Thomas. Margaret ran to the convulsing child. Her hands moved with learned precision, turning the girl on her side, protecting the airway. Clara watched over her shoulder, still shackled, calling out corrections. Support her neck. There. Now the cold compress on the pulse points. The seizure passed. The girl breathed, lived. The marshal pulled out the warrant again, read it, looked at Senator Morrison's seal at the bottom. The warrant says wanted for questioning, not wanted for arrest. Clara's head snapped toward him. Seems to me. The marshal continued. Questioning could happen anywhere, even here, after the epidemic passes. He pulled out a key. The shackles fell away, striking the floor with a sound like church bells. We'll camp outside town, away from the contagion. When this is over, we talk. That's the deal. Clara nodded, already moving back to her patients. The critical boy's breathing had deteriorated while they argued. She grabbed her tools, cut a new airway through his throat, blood sprayed across the marshal's boots. He didn't step back. "How many more will die?" he asked. "With treatment, maybe 5. Without..." Clara looked at the packed church. "All of them." The marshal walked out. His deputies followed. Clara heard them setting up camp at the town's edge. Guards or protectors. She couldn't tell. Didn't care. 3 weeks. 3 weeks of 18-hour days. Of cutting airways by lamplight. Of teaching Margaret and 6 other women basic nursing. Of fighting death with knowledge and willow bark and prayers she didn't believe, but spoke anyway for those who needed them. The epidemic broke like fever, sudden and complete. One morning, no new cases. The next day, recoveries outnumbered relapses. Within a week, the last critical patient stabilized. Clara stood in the church-turned hospital, counting empty beds. 43 had died total, but over 100 lived who shouldn't have. She knew because she'd kept records. Every patient, every treatment, every outcome. The kind of documentation that had once been used against her in St. Louis. Dr. Mitchell, the marshal, stood in the doorway. He'd waited, as promised. "It's time." Clara washed the blood from her hands. 21st time that day. The lye soap had worn her skin raw, cracks bleeding at the knuckles. She followed him outside. The town had gathered. Not a mob this time. Organized. The mayor stood with the town council. Mrs. Daniels. Recovered enough to stand, though her voice would never fully return. Benjamin and Margaret. Thomas between them. "Before you take her," Mayor Daniels said to the marshal, "we have business." He pulled out a document. Official letterhead. Territorial seal. By authority of the governor of Kansas Territory, and with the endorsement of this town council, we hereby establish Dr. Clara Mitchell's medical practice as the official medical facility of Millbrook. Clara's breath stopped. Furthermore, the mayor continued, we've pooled funds for construction of a proper clinic. Dr. Mitchell's salary to be paid by town taxes, starting immediately. That's all well and good, the marshal said. But she still has to answer for what? A new voice? Clara turned. Dr. James Wright stepped off the noon stagecoach. Her mentor from St. Louis, hair grayer than she remembered, moving stiff from the long ride. But there, real. James. Clara's voice came out cracked. Clara. He walked to her, pulled out a paper. Senator Morrison sends his regards. And this. Clara read. Her hands shook for the first time in 3 weeks. A pardon. His mistress, now his wife, insisted. Apparently, she never forgot the doctor who saved her life when everyone wanted her dead, when she heard you'd been found. Wright smiled. She threatened to reveal everything if he didn't make this right. The marshal read the pardon. This is legitimate. Signed by the senator and witnessed by a federal judge. Wright turned to Clara. The medical board also reconsidered. Your license has been reinstated. Clara's knees buckled. Margaret caught her, held her up. Additionally, Wright continued, St. Louis General would like to offer you a position. Chief of Women's Medicine. Full privileges. Silence stretched across the town square. Everyone watching Clara, waiting. She looked at the church where she'd fought death, at the sealed well that had poisoned them, at the people who'd seen her at her lowest, bought at auction, and her highest, saving their lives, at Thomas, who'd lived because she'd acted, at the mother still visiting the grave of the baby Clara hadn't saved. No, Clara said. Wright blinked. No, my place is here. Clara turned to the mayor. Where do I sign? The mayor handed her the pen. She signed her name, Dr. Clara Mitchell, on the official documentation. The same hand that had signed her auction papers now signed her practice certification. There's one more thing, Benjamin said. He pulled out a small package. "We found this at the auction house. Thought you might want it." Clara opened it. Her medical school graduation photo. All the women physicians of her class. Young faces full of hope before the world taught them their place. "We'll hang it in the new clinic," Margaret said, "so everyone knows exactly who saved them." The marshal mounted his horse. "Seems my business here is done." He touched his hat to Clara. "Doctor." The federal agents rode out. Wright stayed another week, helping Clara establish proper medical protocols, teaching the women she'd trained more advanced techniques. When he left, he pressed a letter into her hand. "From the Women's Medical College. They want you to know you're not alone." Clara read it that night in her cabin, her home now. Messages from her classmates, all struggling, all surviving, all refusing to surrender their calling. She hung her diploma on the wall, not hidden, not ashamed, displayed where everyone could see. Outside her window, the town rebuilt. The epidemic had broken more than bodies. It had broken assumptions about what mattered, who mattered. Thomas knocked on her door. "Aunt Clara, Ma says supper's ready." Aunt Clara, not doctor, not in private. In private, she was family. She walked to the main house. Benjamin played his harmonica on the porch. Margaret stirred something that smelled like home. Thomas set the table, carefully placing an extra setting. "For the doctor who saved us," he said, grinning. Clara sat in her chair, the same chair where she'd first sat as property. Now she sat as herself. Through the window, she could see the town cemetery, 43 new graves, but also, walking the streets, over 100 people who lived, who would marry, have children, build futures because she'd finally stopped hiding. Benjamin started a new song. Margaret hummed along. Thomas tapped his fork on the table, keeping time. Clara closed her eyes and listened. For the first time since St. Louis, since the trial, since the auction block, she felt the thing she'd thought lost forever. Peace. Not the peace of surrender. The peace of purpose fulfilled, of skills used, of lives saved despite those who'd tried to stop her. Tomorrow, she'd see patients in her new clinic, would train more nurses, would build something lasting. Tonight, she sat with her chosen family and let their music wash away the blood and fear and long silence. The frontier hadn't conquered her. She'd conquered it. Not with guns or violence, with knowledge, with courage, with hands that healed. Dr. Clara Mitchell was home.